Would you choose this over a Porsche 911? After you watch this video, you just might. Before we get into how it drives, just look at it. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage is surely one of the best looking cars ever made. And everyone I've shown it to prefers the look to its bigger DB9 brother. Sleek, low and muscular. It blends sophistication with raw presence in a way that few cars do. The proportions are perfect. Long nose, short tail, and just enough drama in every line to remind you that this car isn't about subtlety, it's about style and beauty. I'd say this is Aston Martin design at its peak. The V8 Vantage cost £85,000 when it was new in the UK back in 2005, but today you can pick a nice one up for under 20 grand. If you'd prefer the slightly newer 4.7 litre as opposed to the original 4.3, you can add about £5,000 to that. Or if you really want to splash out, you could look at the V12 version, which it starts at probably £50,000 to £60,000, so well over double the cost. I've not driven a V12 version, but I'm going to say the V8's the one you want because the engine's a lot lighter, and obviously that equates to better handling. The 4.3 litre version of the V8 Vantage still pumps out an impressive 380 brake horsepower and 302 foot-pound of torque, giving it a power-to-weight ratio of 221 horsepower per tonne. Quite impressive. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that this is the manual version of the V8 Vantage, and the reason for that is that the semi-automatic version, which they call Sport Shift, was notorious for ripping up clutches, particularly if you took the car on track. So I've heard stories about, whether they're true or not, I don't know, but I've heard stories about the clutch lasting one day on a track day. So, and when they break, they're expensive. I've seen figures of £5,000 to £7,000 to replace. So once everyone became aware of that fact, unless their name was Alan Sugar, they went for the manual. All Aston Martins from this era are built on the VH chassis platform that they pioneered. VH stands for vertical horizontal, and there's some debate about why it's called that, but the long and short of it means that the V8 Vantage is built with the same chassis as the DB9, the DBS and the Rapide. It's essentially a modular system made from aluminium where they can easily adjust the wheelbase and the chassis width and the chassis height for any car they like, and they used it across the range. Some say it was originally developed by Lotus, but I looked into that claim and I don't think it's true. It's quite a different design concept because Aston Martin are not just about pure handling, they're about the whole package of comfort and stability, everything else. So it's a little bit different for a GT car than it is for a sports car. But I can tell you, this car handles like an absolute dream, as does the DB9. I've driven it on multiple race circuits now, in the wet and in the dry, and it surprised me massively how good the car is. The new Porsche GT3 is praised for having double wishbone front suspension. Usually in the past, that's only existed on extremely exotic cars like the Porsche Carrera GT and some other select supercars. But Aston Martin really pioneered putting double wishbone front suspension on GT cars back 20 years ago, and it seems like Porsche are just catching up now. The Aston Martin DBS, which shares the V8 chassis platform with this car, went around the Top Gear test track as fast as a Pagani Zonda. And the V8 chassis is actually credited with being the main reason why Aston Martin was so successful in endurance racing back in the mid-2000s. They won Sebring 12 hours and the Le Mans 24 hours in the GT1 class. The suspension's set up really nicely for English B roads. It absorbs the bumps well, but you still feel everything that's going on through the steering wheel and your seat. As for the brakes, you got to push them hard, much like with the DB9 we drove earlier this year. It almost feels like a semi-race car pedal box, but when you do push them, they really stop. I had a girl the other day that I came across who was in the middle of it was a 2-lane road, but she was doing a 3-point turn right after a blind corner, and I had to hit those brakes very hard, and the car stopped almost on a dime. So they work. As for the driving position, as I've mentioned before, I'm a bit of a weird shape, so I kind of, with the manual car, I have to be a little too close to the steering wheel, and James was actually just laughing at me a moment ago off camera. The camera was actually on, because he said every time I tried to change gear, I had to form like a claw shape with my hands because I'm a little too close. But that's more of a fault with me than the car. Everybody that's driven this car that I know of, and also been a passenger in it, which includes Lanky James, say they prefer it to the DB9 in terms of its spaciousness and legroom, even though the car is shorter. That's likely because there's no rear seats in these things, so even though the car is shorter, it's longer, if that makes sense. The performance is, as you would expect from an Aston Martin, pretty nice. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, some people say 4.9, and a top speed of 183 miles an hour, which is pretty much enough for most applications. But as ever, the most important thing is, how does that translate into the driving experience? Why don't we find out? Let's give it some stick. So would you really buy an Aston Martin V8 Vantage instead of a Porsche 911 Carrera? Don't know about you, but I think I would. So should you buy one? Well, if it were my money, I'd still go for the DB9. That might be partly down to my weird shape and the fact that I'm quite lazy, so I don't like pressing the clutch to change gear all the time. I think on track, the V8 Vantage has got the edge. And arguably, for most drivers, the V8 Vantage would have the edge on the road. But for me, the DB9's a better buy. But does that mean you shouldn't actually buy a V8 Vantage? Not really, no. I think you should definitely buy one. In fact, I'm kind of tempted to keep this one myself. On to the Adam Drive score out of 10. We're going to rate it on the usual 4 things: fun, comfort, handling, and how the car makes you feel. For fun, a big part of the fun, I would say, is the noise the car makes, which is just awesome. When I first drove the car, it was on a racetrack, and I said I thought I slightly preferred the sound of the V12 from the DB9, but I have to say I've changed my mind. I think it might have been because I had a helmet on at the time, so I hadn't fully experienced the rumble of the V8 and the way the car revs right up to 7,000 RPM, screaming its head off. Listen to that sound. I mean, Aston Martin make cars that sound good. And I've changed my mind. I've decided the noise the car makes is just fabulous. And that's a big part of the fun, combined with the way the car handles, which we'll get onto in a second. It's an extremely fun car. I'm going to say 9 out of 10. For comfort, it's a comfortable car, as I've mentioned. The suspension is just right. The driving position's nice. It's not ideal for me, but as I said, it's a fault with the driver rather than the car. It's a comfortable car. You could do a long journey. I have done quite a long journey in it, and no issues particularly. I wouldn't really rate it for driving around a city, or if you've got to do a lot of U-turns or three-point turns, because it's extremely difficult to get it into reverse gear. You've got to be a bit of a bodybuilder to do it, and you've got to kind of get yourself down the gym and do a few squats before you can use the clutch. But I would rate the car an 8 out of 10 for comfort. In terms of handling, I mean, it's just brilliant. As I've mentioned before, the car rides almost perfectly. The balance is just fantastic. This has got slightly subpar tyres on the front compared to the rear, but even then, the understeer is barely perceptible on the limit, and when you're not on the limit on a racetrack, it's completely neutral and perfectly balanced. There's loads of traction. You have to really try hard to get the rear to brake traction. There's no push whatsoever from the front end, and I think to give it anything other than a 10 would be doing Aston Martin a disservice. So I think that's the first car I've ever given 10 out of 10 for handling. But the most important question of all is how this car makes you feel. The interior is beautiful, everything's in the right place, it's plush without being overly opulent. It's just a nice place to be inside the car. And when you get out of it, it's even better, arguably. It's just one of the most beautiful cars in the world. Like all Aston Martins, it's extremely beautiful from the outside. So that adds to the kind of drama and the feeling that it is something special, and it is something special. So as you can imagine, the way the car makes you feel is just very nice. And on that basis, I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10, bringing the total to... I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm going to ask for your help now. We're stuck at about 600 subscribers, and it's not been growing very rapidly recently. That might be due to the kind of videos we've been putting out, to be fair, but it's pretty clear to me that people like these car reviews, and so on that basis, we're planning to do a lot more of them. So in return, I'm going to ask you for two things. One, maybe if you've got anything that you'd like us to review, drop a comment in the comment section below, let us know, and we'll either try and find one, or if you've got one yourself that you wouldn't mind lending us for the day, we could potentially review it. And two, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel, we'd like to get up to 1,000 subscribers sooner rather than later, and by subscribing you'd really be helping to do that. So I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind doing it. Anyway, until next time.